Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
When the two women arrived at the club, Jonathan had already sobered up a little. He tensed up when he saw Aubrey entering the room with his sister. Jonathan vaguely recalled Lucian making a call in his drunken stupor earlier, but he thought Lucian had made a call of regret to Roxanne with the courage of his drunken state. Even if it was not a call to Roxanne, Lucian should have called Caden instead. Alas, Lucian had called Aubrey. So all that talk earlier was a waste of my breath. Lucian has really given up on Roxanne. Lucian, how do you feel? Aubrey instantly went to Lucian's side the moment she stepped into the room, and she began studying the man with concern. Lucian had drunk more than Jonathan, and by then, he was already out of his mind. His only reaction to Aubrey's voice was a small nod and a slight furrow of his brows. Aubrey, you should bring Lucian back first. Leave my brother to me, Frida suggested. Aubrey agreed to it with no hesitance. Nonetheless, she had trouble lifting Lucian into an upright position. Just as she was about to head outside to ask for help from the server, Caden suddenly came toward her. Miss Pearson, where is Mr. Farwell? He called me earlier and told me to send you both home. As it turned out, Lucian had contacted Caden right after calling Aubrey. Even when he was drunk, he still could not let his guard down around Aubrey. The sight of Caden made Aubrey narrow her eyes. As she shifted her body to make way for Caden, she said, "Hey, he's inside. Help him out of the room, will you?" Caden nodded and hurried inside. He first brought Lucian into the car. Then he helped Frida support Jonathan into Frida's car. Before leaving, Caden said worriedly, Miss Queen, are you sure you're fine by yourself? Frida waved her hand nonchalantly. Don't worry. Jonathan's not one to kick up a fuss after he gets drunk. He'll just sleep like a pig later. Go ahead and take care of Lucian. It was only then Caden returned to Aubrey's car. Aubrey was seated in the back seat, and beside her was the drunk and unconscious Lucian. Shortly after, Caden started the car and drove toward the Farwell residence. While they were on their way to their destination, Aubrey glanced at the man beside her from the corner of her eyes. Even though they had been engaged for 6 years, it was her first time sitting beside Lucian in this way. In the past, Lucian had avoided her as if she was a plague. Right as Aubrey was reveling in her feelings of pleasant surprise, the car abruptly lurched forward. Lucian was already in an awkward position, and after the lurch, he was even closer to Aubrey. A glint danced across Aubrey's eyes when she saw how much closer she and Lucian was. Then she glanced at Caden. When she realized he was not paying attention to the back seat, Aubrey carefully reached out to tug Lucian's sleeve and pull him closer to her. Now, Lucian Farwell was leaning against her. Aubrey was simultaneously excited and nervous. Right then, Caden stopped the car at a red light and instinctively glanced at the rearview mirror. His heart skipped a beat when he saw how Lucian was intimately leaning against Aubrey. What's going on? Caden already sensed something off when he saw Aubrey at the room entrance earlier. I recall that Mr. Farwell doesn't like Aubrey and is doing his best in courting Roxanne. Why is he suddenly so close with Aubrey, then? Why did he ask Aubrey to send him back when he was drunk? Seemingly sensing his gaze, Aubrey lifted her head to look at Caden. Caden shuddered and quietly looked away. By the time they arrived at the Farwell residence, Lucian still had not woken up. Caden took Lucian by the arm and helped him into the mansion. As they went up the stairs, Caden accidentally staggered a little, and Aubrey reprimanded him immediately. You watch it. Knowing that it was his fault, he did not say anything. Meanwhile, Estella was wide awake and waiting inside her room as she hoped to talk to her father. When she heard Aubrey's voice, she seemed to sense something as though she was telepathic. She went to open the bedroom door and peeked out cautiously. As soon as she did so, she saw Lucian being helped up the stairs by Caden. She ran over worriedly and tugged at Lucian's sleeve cautiously. Daddy." Aubrey was in buoyant spirits after what happened in the car. Seeing how concerned the little girl looked, she smiled and said reassuringly, "If your daddy had too much to drink, but you don't have to worry. I'll take good care of him." However, Estella did not even bother to spare her a glance. Instead, she fixed her gaze on Caden, waiting for him to explain. The smile on Aubrey's face froze as she followed Estella's gaze and looked toward Caden. He felt a sense of helplessness with both of them staring at him. In the end, however, he was considerate of Estella's feelings and smiled as he repeated what Aubrey had said. "Miss Estella, Mr. Farwell just had too much to drink. He'll be as right as rain after a good night's rest. It's getting late, so you should quickly go to bed." Estella pressed her lips together and shook her head, stubbornly following close behind them. "The last time Daddy got sick, he didn't allow me to take care of him. This time, I'll look after him no matter what they say." Watching the little girl follow them into Lucian's bedroom, Aubrey's brows drew together almost imperceptibly. She said to Caden, "I'll stay here. You can take her to her room." He seemed somewhat hesitant upon hearing that. "Mr. Farwell was the one who told me to come over. If she does something to him while I'm gone, how will I explain it to him tomorrow?" Estella was also uncooperative. She held onto the hem of Lucian's shirt tightly and uttered a firm refusal in her piping voice. "I don't want to. I want to stay with Daddy." Aubrey clenched her jaw upon seeing that neither of them would do as she said. However, she quickly shifted her expression and crouched in front of Estella with a bright smile. "Be a good girl, Essie. Your daddy is already asleep, so there's nothing you can do here. You should go and rest." Raising her gaze and looking at Lucian, Estella saw that the latter was fast asleep indeed. "Here," Caden piped up, "Miss Estella, it's getting late. I'll take you to your room." Although Estella still felt reluctant to do so after hearing that, she still nodded obediently. As she left, she turned around and glanced at Lucian every couple of steps to check that he had not woken up before slowly following Caden back to her room. Finally, only Lucian and Aubrey were left in the former's bedroom. Her gaze reflected the myriad of thoughts in her mind as she looked at the person sleeping soundly on the bed. "We're the only ones in the room now. That's a rare opportunity. As long as I play my cards right, the position of Mrs. Farwell will be mine by tomorrow morning. Regardless of how unwilling Lucian will be, he'll have no choice but to give in. It's just that I'll have to take some risks if I want to do that. If he wakes up midway, my plan will backfire." Aubrey weighed the pros and cons of the matter for a long time. In the end, she could not withstand the temptation of being Lucian's wife and slowly approached the side of the bed. "Lucian, it must feel uncomfortable to sleep like this. Let me help to wipe you down." Naturally, Lucian could not hear her voice, and Aubrey only said it once. After she spoke, she went to get a towel, dampened it, then used it to wipe his face. Despite being as careful as she could, she was not as gentle in her ministrations as she had never done something like that before. Lucian knitted his brows in discomfort and subconsciously moved to avoid her hand. Seeing that, she stopped what she was doing and leaned close to his ear. She whispered, "It also doesn't feel nice sleeping in those clothes, right? I'll help you take them off." After saying that, she stretched out her hands carefully and undid the buttons on his shirt, one after another. When she reached the third button, he frowned and grabbed her wrist. Her heart skipped a beat, and her eyes gleamed with anticipation. She thought that something was about to happen between them. To her dismay, Lucian pushed her hand away in displeasure and mumbled, "Don't touch me." Then, he released her hand and turned on his side with his back toward her. The look on Aubrey's face changed instantly. Nonetheless, she forced herself to calm down and reached out tentatively to nudge Lucian lightly. Lucian, are you awake? Lucian." However, he had fallen back into a deep slumber and did not respond. Even so, she dared not resume her attempt to undress him. After pondering for a moment, she mustered her courage and walked to the other side to stand before him. She lifted his arm, intending to lie down next to him and create the false impression that he had pulled her into his arms. Just as she did that, the sound of footsteps came from the direction of the door, and she froze abruptly. Caden had not closed the door when he left earlier. Hence, he saw Aubrey pulling Lucian's arm as soon as he walked to the door. He had no idea what she was trying to do. Upon a closer look, he also noticed that someone appeared to have unbuttoned Lucian's shirt. He furrowed his brows and looked at Aubrey warily. "Miss Pearson, why are you still here?" She was momentarily overcome with guilt. However, she quickly composed herself and let go of Lucian's hand. With a smile, she explained, "I was worried there'd be no one to take care of him if everyone left." "What were you doing just now?" Caden pressed suspiciously. A faint flush crept across her cheeks as she suppressed the guilt within her. Lucian didn't look like he was sleeping comfortably. "That's why I wanted to help him turn to the other side. Now that you're here, you can do it." Caden stepped forward with a neutral expression and helped Lucian turn over. However, as soon as he did that, Lucian shifted back to his original position. Clearly, he had turned over by himself earlier and was not sleeping in an awkward position as she had claimed. Caden shot Aubrey a puzzled look, and the latter smiled sheepishly. "I'll take care of Mr. Farwell. You can go and get some rest first," he said, politely hinting for her to leave. Needless to say, she was reluctant to give in just like that. "Lucian called and asked me to come over, so how can I abandon him like this? I think it's best if I take care of him." Hearing that, Caden's gaze flitted toward Lucian, who was still fast asleep. He could guess the latter's thoughts on the situation. Mr. Farwell did indeed ask her to come over. However, now that I think about it, he only just broke up with Roxanne and probably doesn't plan on progressing his relationship with Aubrey so quickly, right? With that thought in mind, he added, "Mr. Farwell needs to get changed and wash up. Since you can't help with those, I should take over. You can rest in the guest room. I'll inform you once he's awake." His response annoyed Aubrey. If it wasn't for Caden, things might have progressed to the point of no return tonight. What a nuisance he is. Nonetheless, she could not argue with him and had no choice but to agree coldly. "I'll go and rest in the guest room, then. Remember to let me know when Lucian wakes up." Aubrey spent the night in the same guest room she stayed in during her previous visit. As she entered the room, she could not help but recall what she had done last time. For a moment, I even thought of using the same method to teach that little brat another lesson to see if she dares to be disobedient again. However, it was only a fleeting thought because, ultimately, she was still afraid Lucian would find out about it. Now that she had hope, she would never be able to forgive herself if she lost it due to another mistake she made. As Aubrey lay in bed, the scene from earlier in Lucian's bedroom kept playing through her head. I was so close to becoming Mrs. Farwell. If only Caden hadn't appeared. Aubrey stayed up all night, waiting for Caden to come over and inform her that Lucian had woken up. She never expected to wait until the sun was high in the sky, and he still had not come over. The memory of Caden's attitude toward her the night before made Aubrey grit her teeth. She got up from the bed and freshened up briefly before knocking on Lucian's bedroom door. "Hey Lucian, are you awake?" "It's me, Aubrey." Soon, she heard footsteps inside. Caden opened the door and greeted the person standing outside politely. "Miss Pearson, Mr. Farwell has not yet woken up. If you're up, you can go back first." Aubrey responded with a frown. "In that case, I'll wait for Lucian to wake up before going back. Otherwise, I'll be worried. There'll be a meeting at the company in a bit. It'll be almost time for Mr. Farwell to head to the company when he wakes up." Caden lied with a straight face. In other words, he was telling Aubrey not to bother because his boss did not have time to spend with her. However, she did not seem to catch his hint as she proceeded inside the bedroom. As Caden had mentioned, Lucian was still sound asleep on the bed. His brows were furrowed, possibly due to the hangover. Lucian. Aubrey called twice, carefully. Seeing no response from him, she gingerly reached out, wanting to smooth the lines between his brows as gently as possible. However, before her hand could touch his face, he suddenly opened his eyes. They were bloodshot from the hangover, and his voice was also incredibly raspy. What are you doing?" Lucian regarded the person before him with wariness and indifference, as he had just woken up and had not recalled the events of the night before at that moment. Aubrey's hand froze mid-air, and she could not help but feel somewhat guilty when she met his guarded look. I noticed that you were frowning, so I thought of helping you." That won't be necessary," he interrupted in a cold tone before she could finish speaking. After saying that, he placed his weight on the bed and slowly sat up. He had a splitting headache, and the memories of the previous night were slowly coming back to him. "I drank with Jonathan in the club and then I got drunk and called Aubrey to come over." Lucian pinched the area between his brows as he recalled that, and his expression gradually relaxed. "You stayed here with me all night?" he asked. Despite having a slightly stiff appearance, Aubrey still kept a smile on her face as she replied, I couldn't help worrying about you since it's unusual for you to take the initiative to ask me to take care of you." She initially thought that if she said that, Lucian would at least show some care for her. However, she never anticipated him just asking, "Where's Caden?" That made Aubrey choke a little as she turned sideways so that he could see the door. Caden stepped forward respectfully. "Mr. Farwell." Lucian was merely confirming that he did not spend the night alone with Aubrey, so seeing his assistant in the room put his mind at ease. He nodded and said nothing more. "Mr. Farwell, it's time for Ms. Estella to go to school," Caden carefully said after checking the time. He had been assisting Lucian with company matters as of late and was unaware that Estella had transferred schools. Lucian knitted his brows when the subject of Estella attending school was brought up, and he shifted his gaze to Aubrey. "Why don't you allow me to send her there since it's inconvenient for you to do it now?" Caden took the initiative to volunteer. In the past, his boss would always get him to pick up Estella from kindergarten when he had matters to attend to, so Caden thought it would be the same this time. However, as soon as he was done speaking, he noticed that Lucian's gaze had fallen on Aubrey, who was standing to the side, and a feeling of dread crept into his chest. Sure enough, his boss' voice rang out in the next second. That won't be necessary. Essie has transferred to another school, and you don't know where the new school is." Hearing that, Caden widened his eyes in shock. Transferred to another school? How could Ms. Estella casually switch schools, given her condition? And without me knowing it, too? Aubrey, Lucian called her in a gentle tone. The way he addressed her filled her heart with joy. What's the matter?" as she inquired. Lucian hesitated for a moment but still spoke in the end. Please send Essie to her new school. Since I've already decided to cut ties with Roxanne, Essie should also get a fresh start. Let's start by getting familiar with the new kindergarten." Even though Aubrey was over the moon, she did not forget to show her concern for the little girl. "Essie doesn't seem to like the new school. Do you really have to let her go there? I don't think it's necessary to go to kindergarten. Why don't you homeschool her? That works too." However, Lucian opposed it in a deep voice. Given Essie's current condition, she needs to interact more with people so that she can adjust to the new environment sooner. Aubrey did not dare to continue persuading him, so she merely nodded. I'll go and wake her up then." With that, she bade goodbye to Caden, then turned and left the room. Caden hesitated for a long time, but in the end, he could not help but remark, "Mr. Farwell, are you sure you want Miss Pearson to send Ms. Estella to school? I can also do that if you provide me the address." It's fine. Let her do it," answered Lucian. "Mother is right. Since I've decided to keep the engagement going, Essie has to learn to get along with Aubrey." After saying that, he got out of bed. Caden quickly dissuaded him. "Mr. Farwell, you should rest for a while longer. You don't look so good." Despite being by Lucian's side for so many years, It was his first time seeing his boss so drunk. Lucian frowned as he walked into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. His reflection stared back at him, a pallid man with pale lips and bloodshot eyes. A flash of self-mockery flitted across his eyes as he took in his appearance. "I can't believe I got so drunk because of a woman. You don't have anything important scheduled for the day, so please rest for a while longer." Caden attempted to persuade his boss again as he trailed behind him. Lucian looked away from the mirror. No need. We'll keep to the schedule as planned. I need to focus on my work right now so that I can get Roxanne out of my head as soon as possible." Caden felt he could no longer convince his boss after several rejections from him, so he could only acquiesce in silence and head downstairs to wait for him. When he came out of Lucian's room, he saw Aubrey still standing in front of Estella's bedroom. The little girl seemed to be still asleep. Aubrey was cautiously knocking on the door, but her side profile made it hard for him to observe her expression. However, Caden could not help but feel bad for Estella when he thought of how the little girl detested Aubrey. Frida took a sip of water irritably as she threw her purse aside. Aubrey raised her eyebrows with a smile. Let me guess. Did you quarrel with your brother?" Frida's expression shifted slightly in silent admission. Aubrey's smile became wider at the sight. She produced an exquisite box from her purse. Don't waste your energy on him. Take a look at this." Frida froze for a moment, puzzled, before receiving the box from her and opening it for a glimpse. The box contained a necklace by her favorite designer that haunted her dreams. Aubrey, Frida gazed in shock at the person before her. Aubrey surveyed the other with her chin in her hand. "It's a thank you gift. The idea you gave me worked out well." Frida's gloom was swept away in an instant. Putting the box away, she asked about Aubrey's situation. "How are things between you and Essie?" Aubrey was all smiles upon recollecting the incident that morning. Not bad. The kid isn't ignoring me anymore." She shrugged with a chuckle before continuing. "It would have been better for her if she had behaved this sooner, don't you think? I might have been nicer to her." Frida did not dare ask how she used to treat Estella, so she merely said with a smile, "As long as your relationship with Lucian has improved." The most important thing is Lucian has acknowledged the improvement in my relationship with Essie," Aubrey said, casually mentioning the most important news. Frida was surprised at those words. Why did you say that?" Aubrey recounted the exchange with Lucian over the phone earlier that morning. Frida nodded eagerly. "If that's the case, your marriage with Lucian is secured." Aubrey nodded impassively. So, you need not be angry anymore. When I marry Lucian, I'll put in a good word to old Mr. Queen for you, and he will bring you back to power." Frida smiled and raised her glass of water. "In the absence of wine, this will have to do. Congratulations in advance, Aubrey." The pair clinked their glasses, then their breakfast in high spirits. In the meantime, Archie and Benny climbed out of bed early that morning, though without the same fervent excitement as they used to at the thought of returning to school. With Daddy and Mommy's quarrel in such a state, Daddy will no longer let Essie come to our kindergarten. At that thought, the boys descended the stairs in low spirits. Upon arriving downstairs, they noticed their mother was already seated at the table. "You're up, boys. I was just about to come up and wake you." Roxanne smiled at the children and began to set the table. The children's mood improved somewhat at the sight of their mother. Must we stay in this school, Mommy?" Benny asked instinctively after taking his seat at the dining table. Roxanne's hands froze at those words as she smiled helplessly at the child. "Are you not doing well at your current kindergarten?" Benny lowered his head. We want to be with Essie." Roxanne's heart twinged bitterly. She understood how the children felt. When Lucian came earlier, she wondered if she could convince him to have Estella transfer back to her old school. Unexpectedly, her intention backfired. Not only had she failed to have the child return, but she had also incurred Lucian's ire to such an extent that he took her away. I'll send you guys to school later. Roxanne spoke up hesitantly while they were having their meal. Mommy, are you done with work? Archie and Benny's eyes lit up when they heard that. Although Estella was no longer in the same kindergarten as theirs, they were still delighted that Roxanne could send them to school. Roxanne had been avoiding Lucian and Estella lately, so Lisa was the one who sent them to school. Archie and Benny were envious when they saw the other parents send their children to school. Faced with her boys' questions, Roxanne couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Yeah, it's almost done. The two little ones cheered and ate their breakfast obediently. After breakfast, they carried their backpacks and waited at the door without having to be reminded by Roxanne. Roxanne, however, was a little hesitant. She still had some work to handle that morning, but as much as she didn't want to admit it, she wanted to try her luck and see if Lucian would change his mind and send Estella back to the kindergarten. Even if the chance was slim, she didn't want to miss it. Mommy, we're going to be late. Archie and Benny couldn't help but urge after waiting for some time. Only then did Roxanne return to her senses and smile at them apologetically. Let's go. Having said that, she suppressed the hesitation in her heart, picked up her bag, and walked over to the boys. When they arrived at the kindergarten's entrance, Roxanne alighted from the car and walked Archie and Benny to Pippa. Miss Jarvis, it's been a while. Pippa greeted Roxanne with a smile. Then, she lowered her head to look at Archie and Benny. The sight of the two boys caused sorrow to fill her heart. She had gotten used to seeing them with Estella. Recently, the sight of the boys would remind Pippa of Estella, and she couldn't help wondering how Estella was doing in a new environment. Roxanne hummed gently in response. I've been busy with work lately. Thank you for taking good care of Archie and Benny, Ms. Ward. Both the ladies were a little distracted and didn't chat for long. Pippa then brought Archie and Benny into the school. On the other hand, Roxanne remained standing at the school entrance for a long time. Judging from the look on Ms. Ward's face just now, I can tell Essie didn't come. To avoid missing out on the opportunity to meet Estella, Roxanne continued to wait in front of the school. However, there was still no sign of Estella even until the school's gate closed. Only then did she give up and return to the car in disappointment. Just then, Colby called her and urged, Dr. Jarvis, when will you arrive? Roxanne had been doing research on the medicinal herbs from Herbscape Group all by herself. Thus, no one dared to touch the medicinal herbs without her guidance. Ignoring the disappointment in her heart, Roxanne replied, Sorry. Something came up just now. I'll be there soon. Colby sensed something off from her tone and felt a little worried. What's wrong? Do you need help? No, thank you. It was already settled, Roxanne answered, her voice sounding dejected. Colby could tell she was unwilling to speak further, so he stopped pursuing the matter and hung up tactfully. Roxanne glanced around the school once again. Still, there was no sign of Estella. A few moments later, she withdrew her gaze, laughed self-deprecatingly, and started the car engine to head to the research institute. She had forgotten the fact that Lucian had always been famous for his decisiveness and determination. Since he had decided to cut ties with her, there was no way he would go against his words. In the kindergarten, Archie and Benny sat in their seats quietly while the other children were playing games with Pippa. They could sense something was off when Roxanne said she would send them to school that morning. It wasn't until Roxanne handed them over to Pippa that they noticed Roxanne glancing at the crowd from time to time as if she was looking for someone. When Pippa led them into the school, they looked back and saw Roxanne still looking around. Although Archie and Benny said nothing, they knew Roxanne was looking for Lucian and Estella. Mommy must feel terrible after the fight with Daddy that day. At the thought of Roxanne's sadness and disappointment, Archie and Benny's moods were gloomy too. Archie, Benny, what's wrong? Seeing the listless look on the boys' faces, Pippa walked over to comfort them. Are you missing Estella? At the mention of Estella, Archie and Benny's faces immediately fell. I wonder how Essie is doing. Don't worry. Mr. Farwell will take good care of her. Naturally, Pippa didn't have the guts to call and ask Lucian. Thus, she could only reassure the two little ones as best as she could. Knowing Pippa was comforting them, Archie and Benny flashed her a smile. "You don't worry about us, Ms. Ward. We're fine. Just leave us alone for a while." Pippa didn't know what else she could do besides comforting them by caressing their heads. Then, she got up and returned to the other children. The sight of the children playing happily only served to worsen Benny's already foul mood. "Hey Archie, what do you think Essie is doing now? Daddy should have sent her to school, right?" Archie, pressing his lips together, had the same concern as Benny. He still remembered how Estella was bullied by her classmates when they had just joined the kindergarten. Back then, she was still having trouble getting along with the other children despite the fact that she had been studying in the kindergarten for some time. After she had finally adapted to the environment, however, Lucian transferred her to another kindergarten. Archie was worried that the kids in the new school would bully Estella. "What should we do if Essie is bullied again? We're no longer by her side now." Benny knitted his brows and suggested with a straight face, "Why don't we go look for Essie secretly? We have to at least find out how she's doing at her new school." Archie was worried about Estella too. However, upon contemplation, he put on a solemn expression and shook his head. "No. We can't do that again." Why? Aren't you worried about Essie?" Benny was confused. Archie regarded his brother seriously and asked, "Have you forgotten what Grandma said about us last time?" Sonia had pointed at Archie and Benny and scolded them for taking Estella away the other day. Her tone was harsh, her words insulting. Most importantly, Roxanne was dragged into the mess because of what they had done. At the thought of what had happened that day, Benny was dispirited. He sprawled on the table languidly. Then what should we do? What if someone bullies Essie?" Archie patted Benny on his shoulder and reassured him. "Essie has promised us that she will try her best to make Daddy reconcile with Mommy, so her emotions should be stable for now. If someone bullies her, I believe she will tell Daddy about it." After finishing his sentence, the little boy narrowed his eyes and said viciously, "If worst comes to worst, we will seek revenge for her in the future." Feeling a lot better after hearing what Archie said, Benny nodded profusely in response. The two of them then went silent after that. The silence was broken when an adorable voice called out to them from behind, "Hey Archie, Benny." Upon turning around, they saw a little girl with pigtails leaning against their desk. "When will Essie come back?" she asked nervously. Although she and Estella were pretty close, she knew nothing about Estella transferring to another school. Since Estella was often seen being around Archie and Benny, she figured she would try asking them about it. Her question made Archie and Benny, whose mood had just improved, feel depressed again. Even so, they couldn't bring themselves to burst the little girl's bubble when they saw the expectant look in her eyes. "She should be back soon," they replied. The girl's eyes instantly lit up with joy. "I knew Essie would come back. Ms. Ward said Essie wouldn't be coming back anymore, but I didn't believe her. I'm so smart." The little girl then happily returned to the crowd while Archie and Benny exchanged glances. "We need to have Mommy and Daddy get back together as soon as possible," Archie said with a serious look on his face. Of course, Benny understood what they had to do. What did Daddy tell Mommy the other day? She looked really upset. As for Daddy, Benny felt his heart ache as he recalled Lucian's expression when he left the other day. "It's like Daddy won't be coming to see us anymore. Mommy and Daddy have gotten into fights in the past, but things have never gotten this bad before." Archie shook his head as he didn't understand the situation either. "We tried asking Mommy many times about what happened that day, but our efforts were all in vain. Even though Mommy answered all of our questions, it was obvious that she was lying to us. What happened? What is Mommy so afraid to tell us about? Is this about Mommy punishing Essie?" Benny suggested. "No, Archie replied with a frown. Mommy wouldn't have kept it from us if it were that simple. Come on, think. What could it be? Neither Archie nor Benny had any idea what the reason was. Suddenly, Benny thought of something and sat up straight in his chair. Could it be about Mr. Damaris? Daddy had gotten into several fights with Mommy because of Mr. Damaris. Mommy and Mr. Damaris have gotten a lot closer ever since. Maybe Daddy is angry at Mommy because of this. Yeah, that has got to be it. Archie's eyes lit up when he heard that. Benny does make a good point. Let's go talk to Mommy about this. We'll tell her to stay away from Mr. Damaris because we don't like him. Benny's suggestion reflected his pure way of thinking. Archie, on the other hand, was able to see things from Roxanne's perspective. But Mommy is only in contact with Mr. Damaris because of work. He then turned toward Benny as he continued with a frown. We both saw how hard Mommy worked to secure this job opportunity. Asking Mommy to give up on this job opportunity simply because we don't like Mr. Damaris would be unfair to her. Benny felt his heart clench when he recalled how busy Roxanne had been back then. But it's possible that Daddy and Mommy are fighting because of Mr. Damaris. Benny was still on the fence about this. He couldn't choose between Roxanne's career and Lucian. The two of them continued discussing that matter throughout the rest of the day. Being the more emotional of the two, Benny simply wanted Jack to leave so Roxanne and Lucian would get back together. Archie, on the other hand, was more rational and didn't want to affect Roxanne's career. However, neither of them was able to arrive at a conclusion even when school was over. Archie, Benny, look who's there. Pippa spotted Roxanne waiting at the front gate the moment they stepped out the classroom door. Archie and Benny were so absorbed in their thoughts that they didn't even notice Roxanne standing there until Pippa mentioned it. As they glanced at the gate, they saw that Roxanne looked absent-minded as well. The look on Roxanne's face made Archie and Benny more determined to help Lucian and Roxanne get back together. Mommy, Benny called out to Roxanne while running toward her. Having been snapped out of her train of thought, Roxanne patted him on the head before instinctively scanning the crowd. Despite having confirmed Lucian's feelings toward her earlier that morning, Roxanne still found herself coming over when school was over that evening. She refused to give up, but sure enough, she still saw no sign of Estella anywhere. As Archie was walking a little slower, he clearly saw Roxanne searching the crowd for Estella. I don't get it. Why would Mommy keep fighting with Daddy if she cares about Essie so much? Let's go home, Mommy, Benny said softly when Archie walked up to them. Roxanne flashed him a smile and nodded in response, but her legs refused to move. Maybe I should wait just a little while longer. Realizing her hesitation, Archie reached out to hold her hand and said, Essie didn't come to school today, Mommy. Naturally, that meant no one would be coming to pick her up. Roxanne froze in surprise when she realized Archie had seen right through her thoughts. Come on, let's go home, Archie added while giving her hand a light tug. Having accepted reality for what it was, Roxanne replied with a wry smile, All right, let's go. She then walked hand in hand with Archie and Benny as they made their way toward her car. It wasn't until they entered the car that Benny realized Roxanne was looking for Estella earlier. After discussing it with Archie the entire day and witnessing Roxanne searching for Estella, Benny couldn't help but ask, Mommy, could you give Mr. Farwell a call and ask him how Essie is doing? That question caught Roxanne completely off guard and caused her to tighten her grip on the steering wheel. Mommy. Roxanne had wanted to tell them that it wasn't convenient for her to call Lucian, but she couldn't bring herself to say that when she saw how worried they were about Estella. After hesitating for a bit, Roxanne replied, I'll give him a call tonight and tell you boys about it tomorrow. Okay. Seeing how Roxanne had agreed to it so easily, Benny assumed the conflict between her and Lucian wasn't that serious. As he leaned back against his seat, however, Archie jabbed at his arm and gave him a look. Because of how well they knew each other, that look was all Benny needed to understand what Archie was trying to say. Mommy's lying. She's not going to actually make that phone call. Benny pursed his lips in disappointment when the sudden realization dawned upon him. He then remained silent throughout the rest of the ride home.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.